Loan repayment and forgiveness is this idea that we could provide options on the back end for students.
There are certainly a variety of repayment plans that student loan borrowers can select once they exit school.
Income-driven repayment essentially involves borrowers paying some kind of affordable percentage of their income towards their loan.
These income-based repayments are supposed to allow students who may have gone into low-income paying jobs, if they borrowed a lot of money, they can only pay back a small percentage of their income.
Income-based repayment plans, even from the beginning in the early 90s, include a loan forgiveness provision, which is after a set period of time of making payments based on your income, if you still have a balance after that, that amount is then forgiven, so you no longer owe the debt. The idea here is that it's a loan, it has a balance, and it's charging interest. And so if you're paying based on your income, you aren't really paying on the loan in a manner that is guaranteed to pay off the loan. And so someone who has a large balance and a low income could find themselves essentially paying forever.
The National Defense Student Loan Program was enacted in 1958, and it provided students who demonstrated financial need an opportunity to get a low-cost loan and have the opportunity to repay it over a period of 10 years. At the same time, it included a provision that enabled students to have their loans canceled up to 50% of their loan over a period of time if they chose to go into teaching. Teaching being a national need at the time. That program in the large context is the framework for almost all the student loan payment and forgiveness and programs that we have today. In 1965, as part of the war on poverty, Lyndon Johnson created what we call the Guaranteed Student Loan Program. People were focused on making the capital available to the loans without giving a whole lot of thought to making it reasonable and easy for borrowers to repay their loans.
We had essentially what became known as the Federal Family Education Loan Program, or FFELP, as sometimes people called it. It used to be the Guaranteed Student Loan Program, or GSL.
During the late 70s, people began talking about options such as income contingent repayments and other alternatives that might be possible within the loan program. It was soon discovered that in the guaranteed loan program, those options weren't feasible to do, simply because you had so many players. You could really only make something like that work with a direct type loan program.
Mr. Petri was the main proponent in the 1980s of income contingent student loans. Under the Petri bill, with collection by the IRS as part of income taxes, there was no need for any outside private sector servicing of loans. In addition, there's no real role for banks in signing up students and no need for them to provide capital. Therefore, under the Petri bill, it was logical to have direct lending in which the government provided the capital and collected on the loans through the IRS.
In the late 80s, early 90s, as we went from the Bush administration to the Clinton administration, we started experimenting with a much wider expanse of what became known as direct loans, and that experiment turned into what we now call the Federal Direct Student Loan Program, where all the loans now, the schools and the federal government, there are no lenders involved with the federal program.
Clinton took that on as one of his campaign planks to create a direct loan system, allowing people to repay their loans through national service or as a percentage of their income.
Republicans who backed the Petri bill were willing to go along with that.
We really emphasized that borrowers would have a choice about how to repay, and they could change that choice over time. So they would have the ability to repay by the standard 10-year repayment mechanism, by an extended period that might have you repay over 12 years, or the graduated repayment mechanism of smaller payments in the beginning and larger payments later, or through what we called at the time income contingent repayment.
With the whole focus on defaults and how we could reduce defaults and how we could encourage students to get into repayment more quickly and in a way that would reduce defaults, income contingent repayment just seemed like a good solution to a potential major problem.
It was really the first option in the federal loan program that allowed borrowers to tie their payments to their income.
At the time, we were very concerned that income contingent repayment not provide an incentive or encourage people to overborrow. The specifics of what the parameters would be for that, what percentage of income would be repaid, how it would vary, those parameters were developed through regulation.
There was a lot of discussion over how you would do the income ladder. In other words, what income levels would you reach to pay a certain percentage or a certain amount of your loan, and then what was the amount at which you would only pay a token amount.
During 1994, there was a series of negotiated rulemakings between the Education Department and all the interested parties from the education community as to the design of the repayment table. And eventually, the Education Department adopted something very similar to the PTRI repayment table. Very graduated system of income tax brackets that rose as your income rose. And there were different brackets for married couples, single returns, married filing separately, and head of household.
So what you ended up with was a situation where if you were a direct loan borrower, you could get the full range of repayment options, including income contingent. But if you were in the FFEL program, the income contingent repayment option wasn't available to you. And that was a real issue because you wanted all borrowers to be able to have similar repayment plans. So in 1998, legislation was enacted to give FFEL borrowers as much as possible similar repayment options as direct loans. And something called income-sensitive repayment was added where you could work with your lender and have a income-sensitive repayment plan. It wasn't the same as the income contingent repayment loan, but it was an attempt to give borrowers in the FFEL program something fairly similar to the income contingent repayment.
Over time, the income contingent, income sensitive repayment plans, the extended graduated plans were still seen as not expansive enough to accommodate as many borrowers.
The income-based repayment program was created under the College Cost Reduction Access Act in 2007.
Many might wonder if there was an existing income-based plan already in law, why did Congress create a new one? The issue is that the income contingent plan was more limited. It was already limited to just borrowers in the direct loan program.
The income-based repayment program was a major improvement because it applied to all the student loan programs.
The biggest difference between income-based repayment and income contingent repayment is mainly the terms. Income-based repayment is a little bit simpler. The borrowers have to pay a smaller percentage of their income. In 2010, Congress made changes to the income-based repayment program through the Healthcare, Education, and Reconciliation Act. That legislation made income-based repayment more generous.
We were negotiating both the move to direct lending as well as the allocation of resources for programs like income-based repayment.
They didn't have enough money, quite frankly, to make all loans eligible for this new income-based repayment plan with a lower monthly cap and forgiveness after 20 years. So given that they didn't have enough money but they wanted to improve income-based repayment, they created income-based repayment that would be available to all borrowers who were first-time borrowers in 2014.
So that created a long lag as to when the program really would start to take effect, right? New borrowers as of 2014 means people were taking out their loans around now. They may not go into repayment until 2017, and that's when you would start to see the effects of the program.
So that became the third repayment plan. The fourth repayment plan became when the president felt like people were struggling with repayment given the recession. They wanted more borrowers, and particularly borrowers who were entering the economy during the recession, just fresh out of college, to be able to benefit from the lower monthly payment cap the president had proposed and the earlier forgiveness he had proposed. So there, the administration went back to the income contingent repayment program and realized they could amend that through regulatory changes to effectively make current new borrowers who are just entering the market with undergraduate degrees eligible for those more generous benefits. So that led to the creation of what is now called the Pay-As-You-Earn plan.
The Pay-As-You-Earn program was an attempt to include more students, those students that were left out of the legislation in 2010. And then the president realized that this was confusing, that some groups of borrowers were able to take advantage of better terms, but some weren't. Loan forgiveness and the repayment programs are designed to make sure that the dream doesn't turn into a nightmare, that you're saddled with so much debt that you're unable to pay it and you end up defaulting. The issues center around whether we have it right, whether we're providing the kind of tools that students need to better manage their debt, to avoid default, while still having the primary responsibility for repaying the bulk of their loans.
There's certainly a lively debate about what the terms of income-driven repayment should be. These debates are probably going to continue, and really they come down to how much protection do we want to offer borrowers, but on the other hand, we want to make sure that borrowers still have incentives to borrow prudently and that we don't take pressure off institutions in terms of keeping tuition in check.
The core issues with loan repayment over time are really trying to figure out, as with a lot of other things in higher education policy, we create wonderful programs, but how can we make sure that as we are developing repayment programs over time, is there a way to look at them in aggregate and consolidate them and make it simpler for students and families to take advantage of? And that's always the struggle and balance in federal higher education policy. We create really good opportunities and programs, but can we also be taking the step back and look at how do we enhance that and make it simpler for students and families moving forward?